We last hopped on for a stream, just taking some time off after the 2023 NFL draft cycle came to a close. And now we're going to kickstart our long path to the 2024 NFL draft by breaking down the tape and our opinions of one of the top prospects that we've seen come out in the last few years at the quarterback position, and that is Caleb Williams, who is widely believed to be the first pick come next year, and who even could have been the first pick this year if he was draft eligible, according to a lot of analysts. So we dove into his tape, and here we are to break it down for you. So, Alex, why don't you start off by revealing what your favorite trait is that Caleb Williams exhibits on the football field?
Yeah, so I think he does a lot really well. I think that's quite obvious. He's just definitely deservedly in the conversation to be the first overall pick this year. If he was draft eligible, I think to me my favorite thing that I saw on tape is just his ability as a passer while he's scrambling.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he's got great accuracy while he's moving around. He throws really well on the run, but he just has this knack for putting pressure on the defense while he's running towards the line of scrimmage that forces the defense to make the decision for him whether he's going to run or pass the ball. Because obviously by running towards the line of scrimmage, it draws the defense in, which opens up guys downfield, or vice versa. They don't bite on him running towards the line of scrimmage, and he can run for 10, 15, 20 yards, and he's extremely athletic as well.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, that was just what jumped out on tape the most. We'll break it down a little bit more, get into all the really good details, but that was the first thing, and I was like, wow, this is probably the best that I've seen scouting
Yeah.
in a prospect.
Yeah, I think he has some Patrick Mahomes type ability to improvise and to throw off a variety of platforms, of arm angles. He can really adjust those areas in his favor when he's got to get around an incoming defender or he's throwing on the run. But as you said, he's remarkable at doing so. And one thing that I would add about his ability there in that regard is that he also maintains his elite vision of the field when he's throwing on the run. And that's something that's extremely difficult because you're not set in the pocket, but he still manages to find the open no matter what. And honestly, if I think I would have had the same answer with you, is how amazingly he throws on the run is probably my favorite trait of his. But I'd say after that, it's probably his ability to find the open man on every play, no matter the situation. Even though he's a shorter quarterback, you never see him failing to see over the line of scrimmage, for example. And he routinely is able to find that open guy, no matter if he's a first read, second read, third read, no matter how developed the route is, or if the play has broken down and he has to scramble, he's always going to find that guy. So that's something that I find super impressive in his game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think now, before we kind of get into a deep dive a little bit, obviously he's not a perfect prospect. I think that some people might have painted this picture that Caleb Williams is, the best quarterback prospect ever just because of how highly he's been talked about. I still think he has some flaws. They're not huge, right? I think, all these flaws are fixable. He could, end up as a top quarterback in the NFL someday. But what was kind of the most noticeable flaw that you saw in Williams' game?
I'm going to cheat a little bit on this question because I don't think there was one real flaw that stood out to me that much, but I thought his biggest weakness was a specific game. And that's the game against Oregon State that USC won 17-14, and he just didn't look like Caleb Williams. And it really looked like Oregon State's blitzing ability got to him. He was rushed, and contrary to what he showed in other games, in this game he really struggled to make plays inside and outside of structure. His accuracy was just far below what he exhibited in other games. And I was expecting him to recover. I watched the first half. I was like, rough first half. He's going to come out here and he's going to dice them up. And it just didn't happen. He never got it to click that game. And so it just makes me wonder, a player of that talent against a defense that isn't even one of the best in college football, he got rattled. Is there a is could this be a tendency that's going to become an issue in the NFL when things start going against him? Is he going to be able to recover in game? And I think that he showed that he can do that in other games. I mean, he threw there were games in which he threw an interception and still had an incredible game altogether, and that didn't derail his game. But that game was just really rough, and it asked some questions.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, maybe putting it as a weakness more than a flaw is probably a better way to put it because I don't think he has any true weaknesses to his game.
Yeah,
One thing that I kind of noticed um, throughout the entire season in his tape, really to me came down to uh, him just wanting to go for the home run ball every time.
yeah,
And like I get it, I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that always want to do the flashy play, and I would just like to see him, maybe throw it to the check down guy if no one's open instead of holding the ball and trying to make something happen. You
yeah,
don't need to do that, every single play. And that's really easily fixable. I mean, we see plenty of quarterbacks be able to make that transition, and it's definitely easier to do that in college, easier to hold on to the ball, easier to run away from these defensive linemen. But that's just something I would like to see cleaned up a little bit. But again, that doesn't really take away anything from his ability.
yeah.
And those plays show off his ability. I
Yeah.
just like to see him, tone it down a little bit.
I agree with that, and there for me one last thing on the couple flaws that he has. There were a couple interceptions where he failed to see a safety, a linebacker, and so he just will want to clean that up. So I think you were right to bring up that he's not a perfect prospect, and I don't think there are any analysts that are specifically saying he is, but just because he's the runaway favorite to be the first overall pick, he's kind of fallen in this category of guys when they're known to be the first pick before their last season of college football. Everyone just puts them on a pedestal and acts like they are going to be a flawless prospect. And that's the same thing that happened with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was a fantastic prospect. He was just a notch below perfect. And that's still great. And I think that's what Caleb Williams is. And to give a more holistic evaluation of Caleb Williams, I mean, we talked about what he can do outside the pocket. And I want to give one emphasis on that is that he's a very underrated runner. As good as he can throw on the run, he can tuck it and turn into a running back. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't hear too much about his running ability, but man, the way he can spin out of contact, he's fairly elusive. He's tough. I really loved his running ability, but in the pocket, I mean, he maneuvers around pressure really well, senses everything that's around him. He's got great poise. He's got a cannon of an arm, which you'd like to think is especially useful for throwing the deep ball. But I think where having a big arm is really the most useful is putting it zip on your passes and getting them to the intermediate range really fast. And that's what he's good at. And I find that he's able to, as I said, go through progressions, find the open man, deliver the ball quickly, accurately, and that just makes him such a good distributor inside the structure. And then on top of that, we've talked about how good his improvisational ability is.
Yeah, and I mean he's also a very good pocket passer. I think that the flashiest plays come when he's improvising, when he's outside the pocket, but he can do really well inside structure. Like you mentioned, he progresses through his reads. I think his footwork and his mechanics are really solid. Um, I think at times a little bit inconsistent, but again, I'd expect that to continue to improve in his third season as a college quarterback. Um, I also think that um, sorry, that he's really good in the RPO game as well. You mentioned him as a runner. I think he shows great patience, waiting for again that defender to make the decision for him, whether he's going to keep the ball and run, hand it to the running back, or pull it and pass it. So I think he's just really good all around pocket passer, outside the pocket as a runner. And then you mentioned that arm talent again. I think before you said he can throw from off platform from a variety of different arm angles, and he fits the ball into really tight windows. And then he also shows anticipation. He can lead the receivers, throw them open, which to me is always a huge thing to see from a quarterback. Not always throwing to the guy who is open, but throwing the guy open. So I think he displays a lot of the traits that you're looking for, and he definitely deserves to be in the conversation that Trevor Lawrence was. Even Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were kind of talked about as these top quarterbacks a year out. So definitely in that well deserved to be in that conversation with them.
Yeah, and I agree with the people that said that if he was in this draft, he should be the first pick over Young and Stroud. Just as good as those two are, I think Williams was already a better prospect at the end of his redshirt sophomore year, which is or no, true sophomore year, which is pretty remarkable. But now that we've painted a good picture of who he is as a football player, what do you expect from him in 2023?
So I don't expect a repeat Heisman. I
Yeah,
just think I think that's too hard to do.
yeah,
Just because you're expected to exceed your previous season. Um, and I just think that's hard. I think it's easier to vote for a guy who hasn't won it before, because they haven't set an expectation already. I expect him to have a great season. Uh, I mean, I haven't dug into the weeds of college football as much as other purely college football analysts would. I would assume that USC is going to be in contention for a playoff spot. I think when anytime you have arguably the best quarterback in college football, you should be in that conversation. And I expect him to continue to put on all these flashy plays. Expect him to, improve his tape, and just have another, really, really good season.
yeah, I'm right with you on all of that. And I think now we can wrap up by talking about what we expect from him in the NFL. And thinking because that's the thing is this a guy that we expect to be a good NFL quarterback or who we expect to go on and be a several time Pro Bowler, winning a Super Bowl, Hall of Fame type quarterback? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think Caleb will be the latter. As much as I actually, it's almost like I'm pumping the brakes right now because I'm saying he's not a perfect prospect, but he's still fantastic. And the traits he has, combined with the intelligence level on the football field, the perceived maturity that you can really sense just by the way that he plays football and from everything that we've heard about him, I think that Caleb Williams, with today's NFL, that is going to emphasize his ability to make plays that are unconventional and improvisational. I think Caleb Williams have a lot of success, and really you could follow the blueprint of the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not quite saying that he's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but I'm saying that if you coach him up and style an offense the way the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes, you could have a great level of success with Caleb Williams and turn him into a Pro Bowl, Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't ever want to put the Hall of Fame projection on anyone. I think
Yeah,
that's
not
a
a
lot comes into
but
to play. Yeah, if I had to bet money, I'd bet on him making an All Pro team versus just being an average run and quarterback. I think he has all that talent in the world. Really quickly before we wrap this up, where right now does he rank in the quarterbacks that you've scouted, and then where do you expect him to rank? I think kind of the top names probably Trevor Lawrence,
yeah.
Joe Burrow. So where does he rank with those guys?
This okay, to start off, this is a little tough for me because I wanted and should have put Joe Burrow above Trevor Lawrence. I remember telling you, dude, I when I watched Trevor Lawrence, I like him, but I'm not sure that he's above Joe Burrow. And you're like, no, he's crazy. And I'm not saying I made that decision based on what you said, but I rationalized and thought, okay, if we're comparing across years, I'll have Lawrence a hair above Burrow. And so now with Caleb Williams, in hindsight, it would feel right to sandwich him between Burrow and Lawrence, but that's not how I ended up setting my rankings. So I'm going to say that seeing from this tape what we have so far with Caleb Williams, I'd say he's just a hair under Burrow. For me, it goes Lawrence, Burrow, Williams. But he has the potential to pass them and be the best quarterback I've ever scouted if he were to improve on the flaws that he had this year. If he can overcome the odds and become a back to back Heisman winner because he played just that well. And if there's really no blemish on his resume this year, like the Oregon State game, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would have him 3rd behind those 2, and then totally agree that he has the potential to surpass those other 2, and I think it comes down to his athleticism and his improvisational ability. The other 2, I don't they obviously showed that, but they didn't show the improvisational potential that, Williams shows.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up our early discussion on Caleb Williams. I'm sure as we kind of get into watching some more tape, we'll have a couple more of these talking about some of the other prospects. But thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll get into more 2024 draft content soon.